Hey everyone, we're here to tell you about the Venture Maidens podcast.
For lifelong gamers.
For longtime friends.
Doing a real play 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons podcast.
Including such themes as
awkward NPC romance.
Darts to the butt.
Chopping things with axes.
Find us on iTunes, Spreaker, Twitter, Facebook, or Twitch.
New episodes every other Sunday.
Or every other Wednesday on Twitch.
Check out our website, www.theventuremaidens.com.
And start the quest today. Until then, venture away.
This is Tabletop Babble. I'm James Introcaso. This week on the show, I am talking with the Venture Maidens. I am super duper excited to sit down and chat with them. They are one of the podcasts on the Don't Split the Podcast Network, an actual play, 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons podcast with an amazing story and a cast without any dudes. So check them out. Here is my conversation with them right now, but you should... Before you listen to this, you should stop this, go over to Venture Maidens and subscribe now. Check it out. They also just launched their Patreon. So if you are a listener to the podcast, I highly suggest you go ahead and become a patron. I know that I am one. All right, now I am here with the Venture Maidens, one of my very favorite actual play podcasts right here on the Don't Split the Podcast Network. Thank you so much for joining me today, ladies. It is amazing to have you here. Before we jump into our topic, let's go around the table. Let me know who you are and what you do in the world of tabletop role-playing games. And why don't we start with you, Celeste?
Hey everybody, my name is Celeste Conowitch. I have been a longtime player and GM for an assortment of role-playing games of the tabletop variety, with a particular emphasis on Dungeons & Dragons. I am the Dungeon Master for an all-female real play 5th ed podcast on this network called Venture Maidens.
Excellent. Well, it is awesome to finally have you here at Tabletop Babble. With you is, of course, Brittany. Brittany, who are you and what do you do in the world of tabletop role-playing games?
Hi, I'm Brittany Quintero. In our Venture Maidens podcast, I play the very socially awkward elven warlock named Arnadel Ithil. And I've been playing, actually, Celeste, Naseem, and Sage were all my first introduction to Dungeons and Dragons a couple years ago. So I absolutely became obsessed with playing. We started on 3.5. Thank you. I was like, why does that sound weird?
So hard.
3.5 edition. And now just as of in the last year, I started running games myself. I actually really enjoy DMing. I think I might enjoy DMing more than I like playing.
Wow.
And Naseem, who are you and what do you do in the world of tabletop role-playing games?
I'm mostly just a player. I love playing. I've never DM'd a game before. Oh, by the way, I play Saya Noor on the Venture Maidens. But I have mad respect for people who do play as the GM or DM or whatever. The thought of doing that terrifies me, and I have so much more. I feel like I have all the freedom when I'm a character. So that's what I do. And my first introduction was also through Celeste. We've known each other since high school, and she ran my first game. And that was amazing. It was like a year-long campaign. And since then, I've been playing with her and with other friends. And I love it.
Well, it is great to have you here. Great to sort of meet you. This is the first time I am talking with you. And I'm also the first time I am talking with Sage. Sage, who are you and what do you do in the world of tabletop role-playing games?
So I'm Sage Stafford, pronouns they, them. I've been playing with these wonderful women for 4 years now. I've also more recently got into Mage 20th edition, White Wolf RPG, and I've been running a Mage the Ascension game, so that's been really fun. I've also DM'd for 3.5 and 5th ed, and yeah, been playing Cara Brynhilda, of course, on the Venture Maidens.
Yes, an excellent, excellent character. It is awesome to have all of you here. And I have to say, one of the things that draws me to all of you is that you have a really great chemistry together. There are moments that it is hard to believe are totally unplanned within your game. And they are these, and I mean that in sort of like a really nice way, because they obviously are, but they're usually very funny, but it's also because they're very human and very true. Thinking about characters who flirt, or some of the more uncomfortable relationships as they happen on the show, have been really amazing to see. And it's one of those things that, I want to have in my group, and I think more people want to have in their group. So I want to talk a little bit about sort of the collaborative aspect of storytelling with all of you today. So this is my big question, is sort of, when you sit down to play, how do you all prep? How do you get into character? And Celeste, obviously your answer is probably a little different than the rest of the crew here. So why don't we start with you, Celeste? How do you, what sort of prep are you doing for your game to prepare to tell a very collaborative story? Because I get the feeling that sometimes there are roads the players are going down that you are not prepared, or you haven't necessarily written pages and pages for, let's say.
Yeah, so this is always a fun question for me. I prepare a lot less than one might think for any of these. I usually walk in with a general idea of what might be cool, but I've been GMing for a long time, and I've found that my players specifically come up with way better ideas than I ever could. Like putting 3 people in a room and letting them kind of go with the story. So oftentimes I'll totally abandon whatever I prepared and we'll roll with that. So the way I usually prep is to give interesting scenic elements or an interesting world. And so kind of set up the pieces of this puzzle, right, that people can play and shape and move however they want. I think of cool ideas and then I put them down, and I put everybody in a room with a lot of blocks. And, I don't know what the blocks are going to make at the end of the day. And that's kind of my strategy for GMing. And it's worked beautifully with the Venture Maidens, because I truly believe, I have 3 incredibly talented role players here. So, they really do most of my work for me.
Yeah, well, and that's a big thing, right? Trust. Just like it would be in improv comedy. I know we always come to improv comedy whenever we talk about role-playing games, right? I think trust is such a huge thing. There's no better place to experiment than when you're with a bunch of trusted friends, right? So don't be afraid to under-prepare if you're a DM and want to have some more of that collaborative experience. Brittany, what about you as a player in the Venture Maidens, and then also as a person who runs games sometimes? What is your sort of basic prep when you are getting ready to tell a collaborative story with friends?
I would like to first address that I have been very honored to, when Celeste and I used to live in, when I lived in the same city as everyone else, lived in San Francisco, we would play once a week, and I would many times get there very early to Celeste's house. And I've had the great honor of seeing her scribble down notes like 15 minutes before our game was supposed to start. And I'm just like, she's like, just give me a second. Don't talk to me. I just need like 10 minutes. I promise
most of those were margarita recipes.
And so she's like madly writing. And then, we would buckle up for 4 hours of like one of the most epic. That campaign went on for like 2 years. I was so sad I moved and it
almost 3.
So that being said, I pull some of what I've picked up from Celeste into my own games. And then as far as like preparing for Arnadel, I don't
watch some teen movies.
Oh my God, no. Arnadel is definitely, I feel like it's not fair for me for everybody like, oh yeah, you guys are such great role players. I'm like, I'm just kind of role playing my 16-year-old self for real. I remember, when you can reflect on an aspect of your personality from the past that might still be lingering. And I feel like Arnadel I envisioned her being like really suavely intelligent, kind of like I think at our first interview or introduction episode, I said something like Spock, it's like I was hoping to be all like stoic and badass.
You did say that.
I did. but then Spock is like way more adorable. But somehow, and in our past game together, I was always like kind of into like hooking up with whatever NPCs. I don't know if y'all remember that.
All the time.
All the time.
Brittany and I have had a lot of NPC player relationships over the years.
It's just because they like to flirt with each other, though. That's all it is.
That's the secret.
Don't let Brian hear that. Yeah, I don't know. There's no preparation. Usually my preparation is I am getting home from work maybe 10 minutes before we go live. And I'm hurriedly trying to get a beer poured and shove food down my mouth and like yelling at my sweet boyfriend to help me with our dogs. Like, Brian, just leave. That's my prep.
And I do think part of that, you've alluded to the history that you've had. I do think going back to the trust, having the history and having done some really fun, possibly risky in the storytelling sense stuff amongst your friends, the more you put yourself out there, the more comfortable you will be taking those storytelling risks and knowing that your friends will catch you or like, hey, what's the worst thing that happens? They laugh at you. That's par for the course. Might happen if you were just sitting around having some beers and conversation. Sage, what about you? How do you prep before a game, either as a player or as a person who runs games?
Well, yeah, for Kara, the first thing I think of, especially because doing the voice for Kara, is my inspiration. And that is Carl from Aqua Teen Hunger Force.
Oh, yes. Oh, my God.
And she's basically just a female Carl.
So perfect and amazing. Oh, my God. I feel like an idiot.
Yeah, and the first line that always comes to my mind is, we gonna stop holding hands in fairyland over here? And, but, yeah, to me, it's always important to have, 10 or so minutes before you actually start the game, whether we're for the podcast or our typical weekly Sunday game, is like to have those 15 minutes where you can sit down and catch up with your friends, what they've been up to over the week. And, because that really gets you warmed up and ready to go. And yeah. And so to me, that's a very important thing. As a storyteller, oh my God, you should see how many pages of notes I have for stories, so many details. But I definitely agree with Celeste that when you get, 3 very talented role players in a room, they're going to make their own magic, and being able to anticipate some of that and find new ways to foster it in the game.
I love when people draw inspiration from an interesting source. And I had said this on another podcast, changing the gender of an archetype or taking a character out of, film or television or something, or changing the gender can almost make it difficult for people to know that you have stolen something, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm glad you proved my point. I worked on Aqua Teen Hunger Force, and I did not realize that that's what that is. So that's awesome. Incredible. Incredible.
Your magnanimity grows, Introcaso, every time I talk to you.
I'm going to definitely want to know what you did, because I love that show.
I know. Oh my God. So many years in my youth.
Yeah, right.
I was a production assistant. It was my very first full-time job in TV.
Oh my God. The bagel guy is the most important guy.
It really is.
Truly the lifeblood.
I was really driving actors to and from voiceover appointments and things like that. So it was not as...
you run the show more than they like to admit.
It was great. It was great. I love my time in Atlanta. But Naseem, how about you? What do you do as your prep to get into playing some role-playing games?
I agree with Sage really in the discussion portion before we actually play. It's nice when, we all have crazy weeks, we all have busy lives, and then when you come down to play, you might not be in the right headspace to just focus on something other than your own reality. So that really helps. But then throughout the week between, we have a week and a half between each live stream. Those characters, they kind of stay with you, and every once in a while you think about them and what they thought of the last episode, what happened, because things don't always go as planned, and you might have a path for your character, but very much of the time your roles will affect your character's development as well. So thinking back on that and listening to the last episode just before we play kind of lets me spend a little alone time with Saya, as weird as that might sound, and what she might want to do in the next episode. But I think the discussion is probably the biggest part of that too.
Yeah,
I definitely agree with Naseem. Like, also because we're very fortunate in that we have recordings of what we did last week, and so that makes it a really different role-playing experience when I can go back and relive those moments versus like in a normal game that we're not recording. You know, I can look over my notes, but there's something about re-listening to those moments that really gets you into the headspace.
Yeah, and as a DM too, that is a really incredible feature to have, where you take, you know, you have this documented form of what happened. Like, because I hear what you all are going through as PC characters, like I've had plot points that I've gone back and listened to episodes and I see what you guys are going through or what your arcs are for your character, and I've just ripped up those notes and been like, well, that's not right anymore, like for the narrative. You know, it's like when you're writing a book and you have a really strong character, right? And then all of a sudden you find everything is character driven, and the story needs to change to support and address those role-playing moments or those decisions.
Yeah.
So my story has changed a lot.
It can be a totally different experience. I think if we weren't recording these, we could be on a completely different path.
I think that's interesting because you do hear people talk about that all the time who stream that they're conscious of the fact that there is an audience. So how do you think that affects group storytelling? Do you think you're more likely to maybe take risks because you want to entertain the people out there who are watching and listening to the show?
I feel like it was more prevalent when we first started. But I'm only speaking for myself. I'm not going to put words in y'all's mouths. I definitely felt like, oh my God, people are watching. Like there's somebody that's listening to this. Like it was felt very third person. But since we've kind of like gotten, at least since I've gotten more comfortable with our process and doing this, now it just feels like we're playing our regular old D&D sessions. I definitely am aware that the writing and what we do in the game is it has to be catered to somebody listening, because if we were just playing in real life, those games would go on for like 4 or 5 hours and we could strategize and the battles would be a lot more, you know, lengthy, you know, they'd be lengthier and more challenging, or not that they're not challenging, Celeste. They are challenging. But
through the heart.
No, I didn't. I misspoke.
There's
my
going to be
mouth.
a total party kill next week on Adventure.
You wait. What I appreciate about that, I don't mean challenging. I'm just referencing some of the battles that we had a couple years ago, where this battle went on for like 2 days, versus like the wonderful narrative battles that we get into, like with Madame Fortuna, Madame Fortuna. That was awesome. We each had like cool strategies that ended up getting rid of her. The long answer is that I feel like it just feels like we're playing with each other like normal, you know, not podcasting.
I would like to jump in because this is a problem or something I thought about a lot before we all decided to make this podcast. I have been an actual play podcast junkie for so long. I've listened to so many, and I really was interested in like the styles and the values and the strategies of how people appeal to the audience. And after thinking about all that, I promised myself that I wasn't going to change my storytelling style. And so many of these ladies have played with me for so long that was the style that worked for us. I do specifically a very role play heavy, almost like combat when you need it, as opposed to delving into those more character bits. So I promised myself I wasn't going to change that for an audience. And I like to think that we have stayed true to that. And I think we have loosened up more over time. Like at first it was such nervous energy. It's so scary to be in front of an audience all of a sudden. To go from playing like once a week in someone's living room, you know, over a 6-pack, to being out there and being like, hey, do you like us? I don't know. I can literally count our downloads. It's terrifying.
Yeah, that's totally why it feels like we're playing. You've kept your gaming style true to what we're used to.
Yeah, what do you think, Sage and Naseem? Do you think you have kept your gaming styles what they are, even though you're in front of an audience?
I like to think so. It's hard to judge yourself that way, kind of. I agree with everything they've said already. Like at first, it was the nervous energy of knowing there were people listening, but also playing with Brittany and Sage, because though I already knew the two of them beforehand through Celeste, but more of acquaintances. But like through this process, we've come to know each other. So it's also learning each other's style of play that you're kind of don't know when to jump in, start taking action. But then we've also settled into the characters, into each other's styles and things like that. So it does just feel like we're getting together every other week to have a game, and people are there with us. They're playing with us, honestly.
Yeah. We love when audience plays with us. Come play along in this beautiful fantasy world.
Yeah, it's been fun, especially after we switched to doing Twitch, to be playing and to be on the Twitch stream talking to people in the chat and like getting their feedback. And for me, like, that is so much fun. I love that we have an audience, and I feel like because of that, for me, it helps me be as true as I can to that character, because there's more than just the people around me holding me accountable. It's, for all of us who are listening who are expecting that character.
That's true. I never really thought of it that way, right? It's almost like the audience drives you to be more genuine rather than more showy in some cases, which I think that's an excellent way to adjust your mind around it. Because I do think when you're telling stories with your friends, again, that trust is important, but also being comfortable, right? Feeling okay and feeling like, all right, here we are. I'm relaxed. I'm enjoying myself is the whole point of the game to begin with, that you want to have fun with it. Hey everybody, just wanted to take a quick break to let you know about this week's sponsor, Audible.com. Thank you so much to them for sponsoring Tabletop Babble. What I have for you from Audible is a free 30-day trial and a free audiobook download of your choice at audibletrial.com/DSPN. One book I think you might like, Dracula, Audible Dish by Bram Stoker. It's narrated by Alan Cumming, Tim Carey, Simon Vance, Catherine Kellgren, Susan Duergen, John Lee, Graham Malcolm, and Stephen Crossley. Look at all these stars. Dracula is an awesome book, and you can read it to get ready for the Dracula Dossier game. Anyway, check it out over at audibletrial.com/DSPN. All right, let's take it back to the Venture Maidens. Thinking about collaborative storytelling, when you are all sharing and offering and accepting and yes-anding, how do you deal with big surprising moments that maybe help define your character, or maybe are moments where you haven't thought about what your character might do in a given situation, right? Like I sometimes find like, yeah, I've got my half-elf bard. I know exactly how this character is going to act. And then half-elf bard gets thrown in some crazy situation that I have never experienced as a human, because I don't live in a fantasy world. And I have to sort of on the spot think of, how would this character react? How do you face those situations and support the choices that other people make sometimes if someone's character does something that is surprising? Let's start with you, Brittany.
If I think too much about it, I'm like, oh, I don't know what I would do in that situation. I think this kind of goes back to me kind of role-playing a certain aspect of myself. It makes it easier to believe in what you're doing, I guess, if that makes sense. So my immediate thought is the episode where we are in that like sand igloo with first meeting Valerius and the rocks and all of that. Like, you really, that's why we titled, was it literally between a rock and a hard place? Yeah, oh, yeah, that's literally what that battle was. We're just like, what are we going to do? In that moment, I really believe that that's what my character would have done, considering all the things. And it was a knee-jerk reaction in my own head, my own self. And then I was like, wait, yeah, Arnadel would do that for sure. So it's kind of goes in between both. I also love fantasy, so I think my imagination is in that realm just in general constantly. So I feel maybe more comfortable with those kind of imaginary scenarios.
And I think it's so great that you are able to put so much of yourself into it, because I don't think of you and your characters as different people. I don't think like, oh, that's Brittany being Brittany. So, I think that's a great way to stay comfortable and stay loose with it, and then be able to act on a dime, because you can think, what would I do? And then even twist that just a little bit to make it fit with whatever the character is doing. Or sometimes it's, I would run away in this situation, and so would this character. So that's what's happening. Sage, what about you? How do you sort of react to big things and decide when it's time to make a big surprising choice?
Before the start of every campaign, whenever I make a character, you can ask Celeste. She's like had them all in her Facebook messages. But I write
beautiful,
really long, intricate narrative backstories for my character, and like pick out those really defining moments that made them who they are, that inform their personality. And so I think because I do a lot of that character work in the beginning, it really helps me get into the mindset of my character, and to be able to face those moments very strongly, and also the fact that I'm always playing with people who I trust so much, who I'm very comfortable with, and knowing that whatever choice I make as my character, that that will be supported and it'll be received. And being able to provide that also for fellow players, to be like, no, you do you, you do you, girl. That we're able to face those head on and to make a bold choice.
It's good to be fearless. And long backstories, it's funny, I always have this debate with other DMs because I love them. I love to get a long backstory from a player because it shows me they've really thought about the character and they're really into the character. So I take that as a good thing. And, they're going to have to sit through hours of my crap. So I can take the time to read, their backstories as well, which I think is great.
James, I totally agree with you. Getting long, beautiful backstories is awesome because it's their players just handing you a gold mine of ideas right there in front of you. Like ways to motivate them, ways to pull out their heartstrings, ways to incorporate things. You know immediately what will be attractive to them or not. It's always an amazing thing to get an excellent backstory, in my opinion.
I agree, and I'm writing down every friend and family member you left alive in that backstory.
Oh, exactly.
Naseem, what about you? How do you decide and react to big, surprising choices?
You guys wouldn't like me because I'm the complete opposite. I really, I make my character and a very vague idea of a backstory, and usually their backstories are kind of vague, and I love it when my DM surprises me. So I know it's more challenging, but it makes it more fun, and I think of it as growing with the character and being, surprising myself with the choices she makes, and I also trust that Celeste, she's a great DM. She can find a way to meld those threads of storytelling together and make it work with each other when we do different surprising things. I trust that she's going to do a great job. And when I have even no backstory, she has made me, come to tears with the things my characters go through.
I think that is another way to do it that I don't think is at all wrong or less fun, because then the GM can say, it'd be really great if somebody had was part of a secret cult back in the day. Oh, you know what? Guess what, Naseem?
Yeah, and I would love that. I would love to be like, okay, sure, let's do it.
So it's great to have some of each, and I do think there is something to be said for growing with the character, because you can start out one way or think you're maybe going to start out one way, right? Brittany, you were saying, thinking about this character is going to be like Spock, right? And then sometimes you can end up somewhere else with a character. That happens to me all the time, where I'm like, oh, I'm going to play Batman. And then I always end up playing it's more like really
it's
dead.
The Riddler.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. Dad joke man. And being able to weave in and out of all of those things, I think is one of the hallmarks of some great collaborative storytelling. And Celeste, that sort of falls to you. It's your job to take these threads the players are giving you and pull them together. How do you craft a moment that is surprising? And how do you make them so they're not super cliche? I think you have a great ability to do that, to take a story in a surprising direction, and also not in the, like, I saw that turn coming, like that was a classic twist. So how do you do that? Tell me, because I want to do it too.
So I think the most valuable and important skill for anyone running a game or running an event in general, really, or being in a seat where you're kind of controlling the action of something, I think the ability to read the table is the best skill that comes in handy with that. So reading where your players are at, what they're in the mood for, because I think I've taught, I don't know, probably at least 30 people how to play Dungeons and Dragons over the course of time. And I've played with some people. I've ran games with folks for years, like a lot of these folks, or I've just done one-shots with people who've never played before or whatever. And what you need to do is look at the people around you and be like, okay, is this like murder hobo squad? And so it'll be really crazy if a big monster jumps out of them. Or is this someone really invested in their character and plot development? Or read the course of a game. Like if we're at that point in the evening when everybody's tired and not quite there or feeling it, that is not a good time to drop a story arc or a twist. You know, so you read it and you read when people are ready for that to happen. Mm-hmm. It's sort of just sensing, this is really hard and sounds dumb. It's sensing what's going on at your table. I've read a lot of like fantasy books, and like something always happens when it's time.
Mm-hmm. Being intuitive, you're literally just saying you're being super intuitive with the whole process.
I guess I don't know really. If you pay attention to the people at your table and you pay attention to how they're interacting with each other, I think when it's time to drop a big character moment. Mm-hmm. And for plot, I usually like to do it when everybody doesn't expect it. Mm-hmm. Even if that takes like a whole game where you fight this thing and then something else comes up, or just like a total blindside. But then if you have a justification for it in the back of your mind, like those are the oh shit moments. I think we as DMs like just crave that moment when everybody just gasps at the table, right? That's the best feeling in the whole world. And generating those and finding the moments when it'll just be that perfect punch. You just got to watch for it.
It sounds to me like one of the things you're also talking about is listening.
Yes.
Which again, I know it's a tenet of improv, and I know it's kind of basic, but I have a hard time doing it. When I'm a dungeon master, I'm often in my own head, and especially when I am playing a character, I find that I get so wrapped up in my own head. Maybe I'm not listening to the other characters the way that I should to help them, to support them in their own character moments. There's nothing more rewarding than people reacting in character to a big surprising moment like that, right? And that requires like a lot of really good listening in addition to sort of prepping yourself and being comfortable and staying in character. So how do you become a good listener? How do you become sort of an active listener? Good advice for not just D&D, but for pretty much all things in life. What is the way to stay engaged when it's somebody else's moment to shine? And Naseem, why don't we start with you?
I think it's just as fun when something amazing or hilarious or awkward happens to another character, because we've become so invested in each other's stories, and the characters that, they're great at. Everyone here, they're awesome role players. So anytime something happens in Arnadel's love life, I immediately try to get involved.
And both of us are like, oh.
And the crazy thing is, I always felt like I was being kind of obnoxious with that, or repetitive or redundant. And then when Naseem and I were hanging out, she's down here in San Diego for a bit, and she's like, "Oh God, that's my favorite part." And I'm like, I had no idea. Oh my gosh, it was like such a compliment.
Yeah, and the NPCs that Celeste generate are also good at interacting with the personalities that Sage and Brittany and myself have created. Mm-hmm. And I would like to give examples, but I don't want to give away too much. But just like Cara going to the bar, and the bartender just knows exactly how to talk to her, and it's great.
Again, that stems from Celeste listening to all of you and not just saying, here is my story, allow me to shove it down the throats of my players, right? Which is a hard thing to do, especially because if you do a lot of work as a dungeon master, you want to use that work that you've done, which is why under-preparing is not a terrible idea. And playing lots and lots of D&D and introducing new people to D&D so you can learn new styles, right? Every time I teach someone new the game, they surprise me with, oh, I guess you could play the game that way, and I never really thought about it, right? That's really good, too. Sage, how do you become like a great active listener?
Really, what underlies all of that is having an exciting world to interact with. So, it's a kudos to, of course, Celeste and the storytellers that I've been fortunate enough to play with. When the world is interesting, when the NPCs are more than just the barmaid who's serving us, but when they have, depth, it makes it very easy to be caught up and to be actively listening, because when you're listening to a scene between two characters or between a character and an NPC, it becomes like an audiobook. It becomes its own beautiful piece of narrative to genuinely take interest in that and to think about how your character would also respond in that situation. With anything in life, the more you put in, the more you get out. And so the more you invest yourself and that you invest into other players, the more you're going to get out of the game as a whole.
Could not agree more. Brittany, what about you? How do you actively listen?
I completely agree. I think that because Celeste puts special attention onto each of our characters' own unique or individual stories and unique characteristics, it makes it feel like we're each super special. And so you want to make the other
we're all such lovely little snowflakes.
It makes you want to support the other characters. So in doing that, subconsciously you're just yeah, what's going on with, it's kind of the same as in real life with friends. You want your friends to be super awesome. So that's why you call and check in on them and catch up and all that. Just literally make an effort to listen and tune into what they're doing. So that definitely comes into the game as well.
I actually had another answer to the question. It actually kind of connects back to your previous question to Celeste about how knowing when to drop certain plot points and surprises and things like that, because a well-paced game makes it easier as well. And I think just the kind of smaller side of our group, if you have a 6-person campaign, I can understand why you might start losing yourself when you're focusing on so many different people at once.
Yeah, that is very true. Having that smaller group, I think, does help spread the attention around and do it in such a way that you make sure everybody gets a chance to shine, probably, several times a session. But Celeste, I think obviously there is a lot of love for you within this group, which is great, and a lot of love amongst all of you for each other, which is excellent and is super, super necessary to be able to do this. It certainly helps when you like the people you play with. So what would you say, Celeste, then? We're talking about active listening. We're talking about how you create these awesome NPCs. How do you sort of focus in on the things that your players want? And do you say to yourself, if we spend this whole session in a bar, but everybody has a good time, is that okay? Is that acceptable? If the story...
That is absolutely okay. Yeah. We have literally done that.
Literally.
Stay tuned for our next episode. I think overall, I really struggled with this aspect of DMing for a while when I was new. So my first couple years of playing, I didn't run very successful games, and I didn't have a lot of fun as a PC with a lot of DMs, and I kind of had to sit back and be like, why? What's going on? And then I realized the hard part is it's when you become a DM, you put on this shoal of duty, right? Where you're not actually, it's not about you anymore. The way to make a good game, the secret, the DM secret, it's not about you. And the less you make it about you and the more you make it about your players, the easier things will be. So it's like you can create all of this beautiful and amazing and wonderful content, and you can love your world, and that's so wonderful. So go write a book. But if you're going to be a dungeon master, use that where you can, thread it in, but the story is about heroes. The story is always about heroes, right?
Yeah.
It's not the narrator.
And that's one of the definitions is collaborative storytelling.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like it's about telling the story together. So when you relinquish that kind of idea of like being so attached to the notes and the preparation and everything you've done and realize like, hey, I want these people at my table to have an awesome story. And what is the best way to do that? And starting to train your mind and the way you play to facilitate that, it becomes so easy now. Like I find it so easy to run this game for you guys. Like I don't think it would be as easy if I was like, here is my thing that I'm pushing upon you. So that's like the opposite of having to listen to folks, right? Mm-hmm. So maybe being more attached to your players than your content, I think is a really good way to think about things.
Well, I think that is probably going to do it for this episode of Tabletop Babble. But before we go, we should promote some stuff, right? If you have not been paying attention, Venture Maidens is an amazing podcast. Now on the Don't Split the Podcast Network, but was amazing before that, well before it was part of this network. So thank you for bringing the amazing to us. Where can people find the show if they are interested in checking it out?
So I would recommend the first place you stop is our website, www.theventuremaidens.com. That has links to our iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, basically wherever podcasts are free, you can find us there. And of course, you can always follow us on Twitter. We're at Venture Maidens. Instagram, we're at Venture Maidens. We now just launched our Patreon today, so you can find us there amongst the artists begging for love and support. On YouTube, you can. We stream on Twitch every other Wednesday.
You're everywhere.
Anything? We're everywhere.
Yeah.
You can't miss us.
Our website literally has links to everything.
Everything.
You can, and guess what? It becomes like that litmus, or what's that? The strip that goes infinitely. Mobius strip. It's a Mobius strip of links, because guess what? It'll take you to Don't Split the Podcast Network page, where you can also find the Venture Maidens and all the other ones. So it just keeps going.
You know, if you Google us, a lot of stuff comes up.
It does.
Pick a top 10.
Is there anything else then, other than the Venture Maidens, that you would like to plug? Personal Twitter handles, as well as any other interesting projects you might be working on, be they role-playing game related or not? Celeste, we can start with you.
Yeah, you can also find me on Twitter at Conowitch. That's where I'm most likely to respond to you. I don't have anything to tell you yet, but I'm working on some stuff that'll be coming up, and I'm sure I will post it at all 200 of our links.
Excellent. Well, I love a cryptic plug. Those are the best. Brittany, where can people find you?
I'm most active on Instagram these days. Well, I'm also trying to get much better at being interactive on Twitter. So maybe if more people follow me and ask me questions, I'll definitely respond to them. And I lucked out. Both my Twitter and my Instagram names are the same. It's Visual Warlock, and with his visuals with a Z.
Yeah, and you do some amazing artistry, some amazing graphic work, shall we say. So really looks awesome. If you have not seen the Venture Maidens logo, this is the person responsible. Awesome.
Oh man,
physically.
She also has tattooed all of us here. So.
I'm a tattoo artist in real life. Yes,
exactly.
I currently pay my bills inking people's skin.
That's right. And if you bring lots and lots of money to Gen Con, maybe she'll ink you up.
I gotta find a shop to work in out there. I actually might be. Actually, that's a real thing. I might be tattooing in
Tattoo Gen Con people.
Yeah. Well,
Let's have a Venture Maidens tattoo.
Get
a Venture Maidens tattoo.
But I do plan on bringing my equipment and being a guest artist in one of the many great shops in Indiana, specifically Indianapolis. So that is news to come, and I will definitely keep everyone updated on that.
All right, excellent. Or, for the right price, maybe in a hotel conference room after a seminar. No, I'm sure that.
You might frown on that.
We're running a classy operation here.
That's right. But I will totally draw on your face with pen if for the right price. So
that sounds more appropriate.
It will not look nearly as good. And what about you, Naseem? Where can people find you?
If you would like to find me, I'm on Twitter at Naseem Etemad and on Instagram at Nazgul, Naz_Ghoul. And I'm also on Snapchat. I don't know what information from there I'm supposed to tell you, but it's Naseem there too. Nothing else I'm working on.
And what about you, Sage? Where can people find you?
For all of your social justice, tabletop RPG, and especially Magic the Gathering needs, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Staff of Sage.
And there are plenty of social justice, tabletop role-playing game, and Magic the Gathering needs. So I'm sure people will definitely be in touch. Well, thank you, Venture Maidens, for coming out and having this chat with me on Tabletop Babble today.
Yeah,
thanks for having us. This was so much fun.
Wow, that was a really awesome interview. I really do love that podcast. One of my favorite actual plays. It's why Rudy and I asked them to join the network. So if you have not listened to the Venture Maidens, please go check them out. I also wanted to take a moment to let you know about an awesome new product on the DMs Guild. So Sean Merwin, friend of the show, an amazing podcaster, an even more amazing designer. He has a company called Encoded Designs that puts out a lot of great 5th edition stuff. He has put out this amazing adventure called Hallister's Maze of Madness. You can find a direct link to it over in the show notes at don'tsplitthepodcastnetwork.com. This is a great dungeon crawl. Sean, thank you so much for sending me a copy to read through. It also looks super duper beautiful. Chris Sneezak did all of the graphic work for it. You are going to love this. If you like really fun adventures that take you all over the place, this is totally worth the price of admission. So check it out. It is called Hallister's Maze of Madness over at the DMs Guild. You know, Tabletop Babble is still a new show, and one thing that you can do for free to help us grow is to go leave us a 5-star rating on iTunes. Even if you don't have iTunes, it only takes a couple minutes to go make an account, and the podcatcher app you're using probably uses iTunes to rate and rank their podcast. So it helps a bunch of new people find us if you can do it. Go, take 2 minutes, make an account, give us a quick 5-star rating if you love the show. If you don't love the show, give us another rating. We love constructive feedback, so we can do that too. This week's 5-star review, which I read out loud so you can make me say anything you want, is Fantastic Podcast. It comes from Jeff C. Stevens, friend of the show. He's been on twice. Jeff says, I've always enjoyed listening to James Introcaso interview some of the great names in the RPG industry. In episode 17, he interviews Rich Howard and Darcy Ross about underwater adventures. You can hear the excitement in their voices as Rich and Darcy share their stories of underwater adventures and their stories of real-life characters that dwell in the deep. These two have inspired me to dive into the wondrous world of the deep blue and create an underwater adventure for my home game. Thank you. P.S. If either Darcy or Rich run an underwater one-shot, sign me up. Well, you know what? We may have to have Rich back to run one, or maybe Darcy would run one for us, because that would be pretty awesome, and we will bring you on board, Jeff C. Stevens. People, go leave us a review. One other thing I wanted to shout out is that Rudy and I will be going to Gen Con. So make sure you check us out there at Gen Con. More details coming. If you want to know more about it, check out my blog, worldbuilderblog.com. I'm sure we'll be posting all of the details there about how you can see us and meet with us. And then I also wanted to let you know about a great new podcast on the Don't Split the Podcast network. That new podcast is called Dames and Dragons. It is great. If you love actual play podcasts, you should definitely check this one out too. Tabletop Babble is a show on the Don't Split the Podcast network. Thanks to Rudy Basso for founding it with me. Our theme music, which you're listening to right now, was composed by Battle Bards. Remember, RPGs are like sex. As long as everybody's having fun, you're doing it right.
Oh man, I really want to experience the magic of Dungeons and Dragons, but I'm a cave hermit who made an oath never to speak to other people again.
And I want to watch a classic fantasy series like Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones, but I can't stand the sight of human faces.
Well, I want to relive the magic of make-believe, the humor of a preschool-aged child, and the genuine camaraderie of nearly 10 years of friendship through only my ears, but I don't know how.
You ignorant fools! You don't even know about Dames and Dragons!
What? But Dames and Dragons? What's that?
Dames and Dragons is a Dungeons and Dragons actual play podcast!
A podcast? So I can experience the spontaneous group storytelling of D&D without breaking my oath of solitude?
That's right.
And I can take part in a rich fantasy storyline without ever having to lay eyes on a disgusting human face?
Never again will the faces plague you.
And it has a cast of 4 female friends who make constant immature jokes as they play?
Absolutely. I would never lead you astray, my friend. Whether you love D&D or just love a good fantasy tale, Dames and Dragons is the podcast for you. Tells the story of 3 unlikely heroes who are chosen to become guardians of the goddess of their world, a floating island by the name of Estra.
By God, that sounds like something I could get into.
Sounds like something I'd love. Sounds like something I'd make.
Well, that's just ridiculous. Dames and Dragons, updated every second Monday wherever podcasts are sold.